So last month I finished reading Raptor Red for the first time, and I enjoyed it very much. It's a book that's been suggested for me to cover numerous times here on the channel, and I wanted to see what all the fuss was about with this book because I feel like I see people all the time praising it and calling it one of the best fictional dinosaur books ever, and while I don't think it's the best, I can see why people really like it. Raptor Red is a book set in the Cretaceous period where it primarily focuses on a female adult Utahraptor who we will come to know as Raptor Red, and the story of the most eventful year of her life. One that contains adventures and tragedies, close calls and sudden losses, curious explorations, and dangerous encounters. But there's a deeper purpose for this story. It's not just a showcase of what a year of the life of a Utahraptor looked like. And the dinosaur itself wasn't chosen at random either, as there is a little bit of a story as to why the Utahraptor was specifically selected for this book. Along with that, the book also served as a way for new and realistic ideas about dinosaurs to be passed on to a wider audience, which was something that wasn't very common for the time. I mean, hell, it's technically not even that common today with a few exceptions here and there, as most works of fiction resorted to lean more towards the science fiction genre, which had a tendency to exaggerate their dinosaurs far from what their real-world counterparts looked or acted like. It's a story that managed to do what seemed impossible at the time. It managed to combine real-world science in a fictional narrative and make it work as an engaging story that can be enjoyed by everyone. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration. Obviously, stories like that have existed well before this one. But when it comes to dinosaur fiction, Raptor Red was still a very unique case. So the question now is, how did this book come to be? Okay, so there's two very important details to know about this book in regards to its upbringing. It was written by Robert Bakker, and it was written in 1995. Now I know, obviously it's important to know who wrote the book if we're talking about how it was brought up, but considering the rather niche genre that is fictional dinosaur stories, especially ones that are trying to be up to date, I'd argue that this is a unique case of not just who the author is, but also what he does for a living as well. Bakker is a paleontologist who's contributed to several significant ideas in regards to dinosaurs that would pave the way to the very book he would eventually write. To give you an example of this, he was one of the creators and leading advocates towards the idea that dinosaurs were warm-blooded animals with greater intelligence and more complex social behaviors than we initially gave them credit for, and that they were more related to modern birds than modern reptiles. And this brief period of time would be what Bakker would refer to as the dinosaur renaissance in one of his papers. At the time he wrote the book, it wasn't entirely a new idea, as the scientific revolution took place during the late 60s, early 70s, but a lot of this can be seen in Raptor Red. That being said, that's not the main reason why this book was created. In truth, there were a lot of things that Bakker was attempting to accomplish with Raptor Red. First off, the Utahraptor was a new find at that point in time, and he saw the opportunity to introduce the new dinosaur to the public in a way that could portray it as an actual animal, rather than the evil, bloodthirsty monsters that theropod dinosaurs were usually depicted as in the mainstream. What better way to do that than to put yourself in the mind of that very predator in the time that it existed in and experience things from their perspective. In doing that, audiences were able to read and learn about the theories and facts about theropod dinosaurs' complex social behaviors, hunting strategies, general curiosity, and their overall struggles of their everyday lives living in the North American lands of the Mesozoic. To Bakker, nature in itself was a massive drama. It is the most ripping yarn ever written. You've got life and death and sex and betrayal, and the best way to approach it is through individual animals. And that individual animal would be the Utahraptor, which belonged to a group of dinosaurs that Bakker was very familiar with, that being raptors. Given his knowledge of raptors and prehistoric life in general, it was an opportunity for Bakker to detail his theories around not just raptors featured within the book, but also some of the other wildlife as well. This book does a pretty good job in going into the perspective of other prehistoric animals. That being said, I don't actually go too in depth with it in this video. My sole focus is on Raptor Red Story, mainly because I don't want to go through every single little detail in this book. Anyways, going back to Bakker, like I said earlier, he was a major advocate to the dinosaur renaissance, as this was the point in time he gave out a lot of his ideas that completely reshaped dinosaurs as they knew it. I'll do my best to point out some of these theories as we go along the story, but as always, I urge you to seek out the book and read it yourself so you have a better idea of what's being covered in my videos. Also, this stuff is just genuinely fun to experience for yourself. Speaking of fun, Bakker also said that he had fun making a story that's in the perspective of a predatory animal. Something he was somewhat familiar with through reading books that he read from Canadian-American naturalist and author Ernest Thompson Seton, who wrote about bears and wolves, some of which were in the perspective of the animals. He wanted to do something similar, but, you know, with a dinosaur. Another reason why this book was created was because of how unique the discovery was. The Utahraptor was technically discovered in 1975 by Jim Jensen, who had collected several fossils from Dalton Wells Quarry in Utah, but at that point in time they were too fragmented and hard to identify. It wouldn't be until around 1991 and 1992 when Jim Kirkland would discover a more recognizable specimen, making it one of the first discoveries of its kind. When Kirkland told Bakker about the animal over the phone, Bakker was the one who suggested its name, Utahraptor. Due to his naming of the dinosaur itself and his many contributions to the world of theropod dinosaurs in general, it wouldn't be surprising if there was maybe a more personal connection Bakker had with this find that influenced him to make this book. And in regards to the uniqueness of the Utahraptor itself, it had all of the attributes that made it a raptor, but just scaled up to be much larger in size, which was something that wasn't very common for a raptor dinosaur at all, because at that point Deinonychus was the largest known raptor species, and compared to the Utahraptor it was pretty small, and the idea of a large raptor was very new. In fact, according to the preface of the Raptor Red book, Bakker had pointed out an incident where one of the special effects artists for the Jurassic Park movie, who were closely following the science behind their dinosaur creations, had complained that Steven Spielberg had essentially created a fake species just to fulfill his want for a larger and more antagonistic creature for his movie. Bakker had reassured this artist that due to how fast evolution can act when it comes to size, it wasn't impossible for there to be a larger raptor out there that was yet to be discovered. I didn't know evolution can affect size that quickly. Too bad that hasn't worked out well in other regards for the average male Dino Diego viewer. Anyways, when the Utahraptor had been discovered, it was coincidentally similar in size to Spielberg's genetically enhanced Velociraptor, whose size at the time was more based off of Deinonychus. Unfortunately, it didn't make it in time to influence one of the main dinosaur threats in Spielberg's summer blockbuster, but Bakker would still be here to tell its story, and that story, of course, is Raptor Red. The story begins in April. Among the vegetation by a lake bed, a pair of Utahraptors, one male and one female, are planning their attack against a nearby herd of astrodons, a brontosaurian species of Cretaceous sauropod. This female raptor is Raptor Red, her name based on the red stripe on her snout that all of her kind have, and the male is her mate that she has chosen to bond and copulate with eventually. Right now, they're carefully picking which of the Astros to go after, before eventually settling on a bull Astrodon. The Astrodon's sensory system tells them that there are multiple raptor species nearby, both old and new, but the sauropods are confident in their size and are too distracted competing for mates. So the Utahraptors take advantage of this moment to strike, as the bull they've selected to hunt is too busy sparring with another male over a female. The Utahraptors slash at the unsuspecting bull, who is surprised at the sight of such large raptors, a new threat that he's never encountered before. The pair attack from both sides, and despite the counterattacks, they take down the Astrodon bull without being harmed. So already you can see some of Bakker's ideas being incorporated into the story. The Utahraptors depicted in this hunt were careful and smart with how they maneuvered around the confused Astrodon. They were very careful to react to the counterattacks and work together to take the animal down. Bakker had done a lot of research on dinosaur endothermy and believed them to be warm-blooded rather than cold-blooded animals. He shows this here by having the Utahraptors perform and act in ways that are specific to animals that would be warm-blooded. They have an upright posture, they're very active, and they're very quick-thinking in their attacks. Unfortunately, however, as adaptable as these raptors are, they can't always suspect death, as it can come from anywhere. After the hunt, Raptor Red and her mate spend the next half an hour eating their fill. When they finish, they rest right next to the Astrodon corpse. Nearby, small raptors circle around the kill, hoping to scavenge what they can of it, causing the male raptor to stand up to shoo them away. After the male does this, the dead Astrodon, which had been laying upright on its elbows and knees, tips over onto the male, pinning its tail to the ground. Raptor Red tries to help him but only succeeds in accidentally getting him more stuck under the weight of their kill, which ends up smothering his face into the muck of the lake bed and suffocating him to death. For hours after this, Raptor Red just sits there stunned at the fact that just a little while ago, they had hunted the Astrodon together no problem. And now her mate, the one that she had paired with and had gone on several hunts without issues, was gone. Forever. What's worse for Raptor Red is that, for the first time in her life, she was alone. Growing up, she had several siblings and was cared for by her parents, and eventually, when she reached near adulthood, she would part ways with her family to join her mate, who she had been hunting with all this time until now. And as described in the book, raptors are social animals and prefer to move in a pack to avoid dangers and secure hunts. On her own, her chances of survival were very low, and she knew this. For the next few weeks, she survives on scraps of dead animals here and there, but nothing too fresh or filling, which causes her to become weaker and scrawnier, which are very undesirable traits for female Utahraptors to have when looking for a mate, something that she's also actively trying to do. For the dinosaurs, and in nature, the importance of copulation is to pass down the best genes to the next generation. In order to do that though, the pair have to be compatible and have certain qualities to make this possible, meaning Raptor Red isn't just going to choose any raptor and vice versa. Part of the qualities that most male raptors look for in a female is one that is healthy, well-fed, and strong. During her endeavor of searching for companionship and food, she runs into a familiar scent, but at the same time, there was something wrong with it. Her brain tells her that it's a scent from her kind, but also not her kind, which confuses her. Eventually, she runs into where the smell was coming from, a pair of male Utahraptors, but something was off about them. Their head bobbing was different, their scent was foreign, and the stripe on their snout wasn't red, it was yellow. Raptor Red's brain isn't able to process the idea of raptors that were like her kind, but also weren't, and ends up responding very aggressively towards them and chasing them away. The males were responding to her need of a mate, but the idea of being courted by a yellow-striped Utahraptor was something Raptor Red couldn't even fathom, as there was something off about them that sounded all alarms in her brain. And while she would have no way of knowing this, she did end up dodging a bullet. According to the book, Raptor Red's homeland was in Asia before she migrated over the land bridge to get to North America. And it was during this period when she was younger she'd witness her parents chase away the yellow snouts, which is where her aggression for them comes from. Turns out the yellow snouts were her kind's ancestors, and 50,000 years prior, her kind and their kind were of the same species that resided in dense forests. That is until a small group of them broke off and became isolated from the overall group long enough to evolve and develop as their own species and live a different way of life. This newly evolved variant of Utahraptor is the group that Raptor Red now belongs in, and she is unable to mate with the yellow snouts because the genes of her species and the genes of their species no longer mix. Should they mate, her babies have an increased chance of being born dead, deformed, or sterile. At this point in the story, it's around mid-May, and she continues her journey in trying to find raptors within her own species, spending the next week scavenging and roaming until she picks up a smell that she recognizes. She follows it to a burrow where another female Utahraptor resides with her 3 chicks. The smell is not only recognizable, but she also knows who this female raptor is. It was her sister, and these 3 chicks are her children. Her sister takes her in, relieving Raptor Red of the stress from being isolated and alone, along with getting her some proper food as she now has a partner to go on hunts with to take down fresh and filling prey. From this point on, the story goes through the day-to-day lives of this new raptor family and their many struggles in avoiding ticks and larger predators like Acrocanthosauruses, and following bigger prey to take down. All while this is happening, Raptor Red keeps her eye out for any potential mates, but she soon realizes that's going to be much harder now that she's with her sister. As much as she wants a mate, Raptor Red's familial obligations make it so she prioritizes her pack first over any male Utahraptor, and considering her sister has 3 chicks, she's extremely protective and not too keen on having any adult males near them. So when they eventually run into a male that attempts to court Raptor Red, her sister responds very aggressively and attempts to attack him, chasing him away. And now's probably a good time to mention how the characterization and the anthropomorphism in this book works. First off, the anthropomorphism is very present but moderate, at least in my opinion. The raptors aren't just stoic wild animals, they have emotional responses to certain situations depending on what it is. They also have high intelligence, problem-solving skills, and a couple of different forms of communication. Obviously, because this is a story that's in the perspective of a wild animal, there's no actual dialogue. Every now and then, Bakker will translate the dinosaur's thought process into human speak so that the audience can better understand what's happening, but this is few and far between. Raptor Red and her kind have their own way of communicating with one another in more ways than just sounds. Visual communication and gesturing can say a lot about a raptor's behavior along with their scent, which sometimes they even pass off in their dung, and in some cases they even leave behind marks on trees and whatnot to communicate their territory to other raptors and wildlife. When they want to communicate with each other, they have their ways of doing so that's obviously not on a name-to-name basis. Raptor Red is the only one given a proper name, and that's only because she's the main dinosaur we're following, not to mention the fact that her name is derived of her physical red stripe feature on her snout, something that all of her kind have. Every other dinosaur is simply referred to as however they're associated with Raptor Red, whether it's Raptor Red's sister, or Raptor Red's nieces, or Raptor Red's consorts. Other dinosaurs and wildlife are referred to by their normal real-life animal names, or a shortened version of their real-life names. That being said, there's still enough personality within the dinosaurs to differentiate them from one another. Raptor Red is a curious but careful animal. She likes to explore and try to figure out how things work. For example, there's a part in the book where she sees a nearby turtle one night and goes over to study it. Not because she wants to hunt and eat it, but because she's interested in the animal itself and how it's able to hide within its own shell. Even though she can't quite figure it out, she's still interested. Despite this curiosity though, Raptor Red is level-headed and knows how to judge her surroundings because of it to keep herself and her family alive. At least most of the time. Her sister, on the other hand, approaches things more aggressively first and thinks about it later, an attribute that's dangerous for a Utahraptor to have. She's not as level-headed or curious as Raptor Red, probably because she's tied to her obligations as a mother and is very protective, but this attitude is also something that she's had since childhood as well. It's qualities like these that balance out the dinosaurs' instinctive animalistic nature with their personalities. In fact, their personalities are combined well enough to their animalistic nature that it doesn't feel all that unrealistic. Of course, I have no idea how well that stands up nowadays, but it's pretty interesting to see. Going back to the story, June eventually arrives, and so do storms that cause flash floods. One night while Raptor Red and her pack are settled into their nest, they're forced to evacuate the area when a flood begins to rise fast. Soon it gets deep enough to where they have to swim to safety, which they manage to do by climbing up a slanted tree fallen onto other trees, but is secure enough to hold them until morning. As they wait, they notice other animals on top of the neighboring trees, using them for refuge until the flood passes. One of the animals there was the male Utahraptor that tried to court Raptor Red earlier, and he attempts to do the courtship dance there despite their current situation. But I mean, at this point, they've got time to kill, so why not? Raptor Red and her pack, along with the male attempting to court her, wait out the flood. Then they make their way to dry ground where the male completes the second part of the courtship dance. Despite not liking the new male, Raptor Red's sister refrains from chasing him away since she knows Raptor Red has been searching for a new mate. So for now, she's not violent towards him, but only if he keeps his distance from her chicks, of course. But things aren't done there because Raptor Red still has competition to face for the male. In the next sequence of the book, Raptor Red, the male, and many other Utahraptors are drawn to a meadow containing flowers that smell like rotten flesh and dead carcasses. This is actually another one of Bakker's theories at play here. In a 1978 paper, Bakker suggested dinosaurs were responsible for the creation of flowers. During the late Jurassic and early Cretaceous periods, herbivorous dinosaurs would feed on various plant life in huge bulks given their immense sizes. which would clear out competition and open up the door for more fast-growing plants like flowers. But even flowers weren't safe from the herbivorous dinosaurs along with other prehistoric dangers. So to ward off their enemies, they developed various means of defense like thorns, chemicals, and a nasty fragrance to keep herbivores from eating them. And in the book, that's why there's a meat smell in the air. It's being caused by the flowers so that no herbivore tries to eat them. In doing this though, they inadvertently attract the Utahraptors who are interested in the smell, and are very confused as to why they aren't able to find anything. Regardless, this congregation of Utahraptors have opened up a different door of opportunity, the opportunity for courtship. Despite Raptor Red managing to attract the male, she isn't the ideal mate given her family situation, which can make things hard when there are other female Utahraptors attracted to the same male who don't have any additional baggage to worry about. It even gets to a point where multiple females are going after this one male, but Raptor Red gets defensive and fights for the male, ultimately winning in the end. Regardless of this, the male wasn't responsive to the other females as he has been captivated by and only by Raptor Red, even with her family bond with her sister and her nieces. The male is now part of the pack, much to her sister's dismay, who still doesn't like or fully trust him. Throughout the summer, there's tension between her male consort and her sister, but being the level-headed one, Raptor Red tries to play peacekeeper as she hates to see two members of her pack that she truly cares about fighting. Despite their differences, the two are able to coexist without any major problems. However, it's no surprise that Raptor Red's sister prioritizes her offspring, even if her consort isn't necessarily a danger to them. At one point around September, the consort gets curious and inches his way towards one of the young, with Raptor Red watching closely to ensure nothing happens. This doesn't matter though, because after he's about a foot away from the young chick, Raptor Red's sister gets very angry and charges towards him, standing in between her chicks and the male. This is a problem that Raptor Red will face consistently throughout the book. She doesn't like the idea of leaving her sister and her nieces as she has a close bond with them, but also wants to be fully mated with her consort. In the end though, her priority is her family. As close as she is to loving her consort, if he were to hurt her sister or her nieces, she'll step in to kill him if she has to. And this worry for her niece's safety isn't unwarranted, as even the male realizes he has this violent urge towards them that he can't fully process. But this is a common thing in the animal world. A female or a pack with previous young that aren't the males will cause him to want to kill them off so that his genes and his offsprings are the main priorities. And seeing how Raptor Red has also taken this parental role for her nieces, that just means she's taking care of offspring that aren't the males. But he cares about Raptor Red a lot, to the point where he's willing to fight against these urges knowing that hurting her family will only hurt her. Raptor Red also manages to calm her sister and they go about their day. It's for the best, really, as they have bigger problems to deal with now. Due to rough drought conditions in the east, Acrocanthosauruses have migrated towards the west, increasing the overall population and making Raptor Red and her pack nervous. So they move towards the west, but not before they encounter one of the Acrocanthosaurs. It's a young male acro who's taking his first steps into adulthood, trying to fend for himself after being driven away from his family circle. In an attempt to find food, he notices a raptor chick in a tree. He pushes hard against the tree until the young chick falls out of it, and the young chick is revealed to be one of Raptor Red's sister's children. And right as the young acro goes in to make the kill, Raptor Red's sister charges straight at him, screaming and waving her arms and claws. However, the acro quickly attempts to grab the chick and retreat, but before he can do that, another raptor comes almost out of nowhere and attacks him from behind the neck. Surprisingly, this second raptor is not Raptor Red, but her male consort instead, who is on top of the acro distracting it from the chick who is able to get away. The acro throws the male raptor into a pile of bones and then knocks him down again as he tries to get back up and retreats. Raptor Red's sister and her chicks are uninjured, but the male has suffered 3 broken ribs. He sits there wondering something along the lines of why he even intervened, seeing how he and the chick weren't related, and how Raptor Red wasn't even there to see his courageous act. Regardless of what he was thinking to himself, it's implied that Raptor Red's sister was grateful for his help, as this was the first time she didn't want to bite or hurt him. Eventually, Raptor Red makes her way onto the scene and sits by her injured consort until he's ready to move on his own. Time goes by and the male heals, but things get bad for the pack once again. Around a month later, after the acro incident, one of her sister's chicks would die from a respiratory infection. Shit gets very sad from here because the book literally says that Raptor Red's sister comes up to the dead chick and begins to make crying sounds. The sister begins to grieve for her dead offspring, a sight that Raptor Red and her nieces have never seen before and are startled by it, but she and the oldest chick do their best to console the grieving mother, with even the male coming over to express his condolences, at least the raptor version of expressing condolences. The whole pack huddled together until the next morning when Raptor Red and her mate wake up. At this point in their journey, they've made their way to the west coast, and noticing that his mate is also in a state of grief, he goes off to the beach to find a gift for her. He's taken notice of Raptor Red's curiosity and looks for something new and interesting that she can feed on. He ends up finding a crab and brings it to her, a gift that she very much appreciates. They spend their days around the beach enjoying their new lifestyle of combing around to find all sorts of goodies brought in by the shores. It could even be a viable spot to raise chicks, but they aren't the only group to have made their way there. Off in the distance, a pack of single female Utahraptors are settled, but far enough to not be of any bother to Raptor Red or her mates. That evening, as they continue combing the beaches and exploring the mysterious wildlife just under the surface of the ocean, they're startled at the massive head that crashes through the waves near the shoreline. It was a Kronosaurus who attempted to hunt the raptors, who made their way too deep into the water. But Raptor Red becomes curious of this sea animal and finds out that she can lure him out of the water by getting close to the deep end. And she basically makes a game out of it. She baits the Kronosaur out of the water and dodges out of the way well before it can get her. Even her mate gets in on the game before they both retire back to the rest of the pack for the night. Raptor Red and her family live beachside for about a month, with this point of the story taking place in December. One morning, while they're still at the beach, Raptor Red's sister wakes up in an angry state and takes it out on the male, as she still doesn't like him all that much. While he's still asleep, she just randomly bites him awake, causing even more tension and putting Raptor Red between them once again. The tension eventually settles, but things get even worse for the pack after one of the chicks get involved. The male was already on edge from Raptor Red's sister's hostility towards him, but after one of the chicks mimics her mother and also bites the male, it sends him over the edge and he snapped at the obnoxious young to shoo it away. But the chick, startled at his reaction, goes in the wrong direction and towards the male's jaws, which he closes on the chick by accident. But where the situation was, the male couldn't help but keep the chick in his jaws and clamp down hard enough to trap it. He wants to close his jaws all the way, but the only thing that was stopping him from killing the baby was his strong bond towards Raptor Red, knowing this was the farthest thing that she would want him to do, but he couldn't help himself. This is where things get extremely hectic. So all of this is taking place on the beach, where they're too distracted with their current situation to notice the dangers from the east. Emerging from the dunes are a pair of acrocanthosaurs, one male and one female, who notice the raptors are too close to their nesting area than they're comfortable with. But Raptor Red and her sister don't notice this because they're focused on the male. Raptor Red's sister charges at the male, who drops the baby on the sand and books it towards the dunes. After the baby is dropped, she runs in the opposite direction towards the surf and into the water deep enough to reach her knees. She looks back at her mother chasing the male, not paying attention to the Kronosaur emerging from the ocean. Raptor Red notices this and tries to get her sister's attention for what's about to happen, but her sister's too distracted tackling the male down the dune. But before she can do anything else to the male, the acros appear from atop of the same dune with the female ready to attack Raptor Red's sister and consorts. And in the middle of all of this chaos is Raptor Red. She's about to lose her entire pack if she doesn't think of something quick. Luckily, she's a Utahraptor, a smart and efficient dinosaur that's able to come up with a perfect strategy to prevent any of her pack from dying. But she has to act fast. She charges towards the female acro who's made her way down the bottom of the dune at this point, where her sister and her consort was. She swipes at the female acro and gets it to chase after her towards the surf. This gives her sister and consort enough time to run to safety. While they're doing that, Raptor Red lures the female acro into the shallow waters and runs parallel from the beach and towards her niece, who is still in the same spot. She zips past her niece with the acro still chasing her, and right as the large theropod goes in for the kill, a large explosion of water comes from the ocean, knocking Raptor Red off her feet. When she gets up, she sees the successful results of her plan. The Kronosaur had completely eviscerated the female acro and proceeds to drag her body far out to sea. The male acro retreats, defeated at the fact that his mate is now gone. But Raptor Red is ecstatic as she managed to beat the acros with her brains and not her claws. She rejoins her pack on the beach, but she notices her consort is gone. She looks towards the north and sees him in the distance. She tries to call to him, but she also senses a group of female Utahraptors farther out. Then she realizes what's happening. He had reached his limits with her sister's hostility if this last situation was to prove anything. Raptor Red eventually realizes that he's not coming back, leaving her without a mate once again. January rolls around, and despite the raptors' victory against the female acro, their populations along the beaches have only increased, causing the raptor pack to get up and move to another area once again. They travel north this time because their scents tell them it's free of acrocanthosaurs. But this region is new to the raptor family, along with its many wildlife and environmental conditions. The climates are colder, and they encounter dinosaurs they've never seen before. White flakes begin to fall from the sky, and they think it's bugs at first until the flakes settle onto their skin and disappear almost immediately. They don't realize that this is snow because they've never seen it before, but they're experiencing its cold side effects and begin to shiver. Although it may seem like a pretty small and even insignificant detail that's pointed out in the book, the shivering is also something that Bakker had discussed in his papers regarding dinosaur endothermy. If dinosaurs are endothermic, another quality that they most likely had was the ability to shiver, which is a method that your body uses to increase its internal temperatures, a quality that both avians and mammals have, and it's one of the things keeping Raptor Red and her pack alive as they trek into the cold mountains of the north in search of refuge. They eventually find an opening on the side of a mountain which leads to a large burrow made by a Segnosaur, a dinosaur that they've never seen before. But they're desperate for shelter and food, so Raptor Red's sister enters the cavern and kills the strangely built dinosaur. The Utahraptors make themselves at home in this new region that's safe from the acros, but is still home to other animals to be careful of. Other raptors, like Deinonychus, roam in large packs around the area as well. There are also troodontids, but they don't actually pose much of a threat at all and actually kind of serve as playmates to the raptor pack. One morning, Raptor Red and her sister hear strange noises coming from a distance. Her sister takes off to go inspect it, and when Raptor Red hears strange noises coming from her sister, she goes to inspect it as well, only to make a very surprising discovery. In a completely unexpected and wholesome turn of events, Raptor Red's sister was actually playing in the snow and riding on her back down the slippery slopes to the bottom and climbing back up the hill to do it again. She gets Raptor Red and her kids in on the fun, and she even kind of sort of befriends the nearby troodons to do the same. They spend the rest of the winter in the mountains, living off of iguanodon herds that have also migrated up north, and when they're done, retreat back to the safety of their den. But it seems that they're trying to aim for something a little bigger than an iguanodon, because one day, sometime in March, they run into a sauropod dinosaur, but this one was different from the usual astrodons they're used to hunting. This one was larger and it had a whiptail. There was something about this dinosaur that gave Raptor Red a bad feeling, but her sister, being who she is, decides to charge in anyways. Raptor Red and the oldest chick, who at this point is old enough to accompany the adults on hunts now, follow after her, but Raptor Red gets even more worried when the sauropod doesn't seem scared or even worried about them charging after it. According to the story, this was a universal rule amongst all predators, in that they are naturally suspicious of any prey that doesn't give off a sense of fear to oncoming attackers, as it shows they may have some means of defense at the ready. And the whiptail does, which is literally the name. Its main form of defense is its really long tail that it uses to whip at the raptors. The raptors try their best to dodge the tail, several times almost getting hit, until finally Raptor Red is knocked onto her side by the whip, disabling one of her legs in the process. Things only get worse when her sister is struck 2 times to the ground by the sauropod, who slightly repositions itself to land 3 more blows near the spot Raptor Red's sister was lying in. Raptor Red musters up enough strength to get herself up and works together with the oldest chick to lure the sauropod away from her sister. At this point, trying to take it down was out of the question, but they are efficient and well coordinated enough to dodge the whiptail's attacks and get it away from the area until it gets frustrated enough to give up and finally leave. Raptor Red and her niece go to check up on her sister, who's alive but badly injured and limp. She drags her sister near the trees to make temporary bedding, but there's only so much she can do since she herself was also injured. The following days, she and her oldest niece attempt to go find food and find a dead Segnosaur corpse. Based on the scent of the carrion, this dead Segnosaurus was hunted, killed, and belonged to a group of Deinonychus. But they are significantly smaller than the Utahraptors and don't dare try to attack them. Raptor Red and her niece eat what they can and return with food for the younger chick and her sister. They do this for several days, but her condition doesn't seem to get any better. Things get even worse when the large pack of 24 Deinonychus realize the Utahraptors are weak and can overpower them. They surround them at a distance, but Raptor Red isn't going down without a fight. As they advance closer and closer, she defends her sister and her nieces by trying to shoo them away with short lunge attacks. At least as much as her injured leg will let her, but the Deinonychus are also smart animals. They can tell that she's injured, and the Deinonychus leader goes in for the attack before being distracted by the oldest chick. Enough for Raptor Red to grab the leader and use up the rest of her strength to kick him away. This would ultimately cripple her bad leg for good, rendering her completely disabled from any more attacks the Deinonychuses make. Luckily for her and her family, that last kick was enough to send the Deinonychus pack away. She's happy with this victory and goes to share it with her sister. Unfortunately, despite her best efforts in protecting and caring for her, Raptor Red's sister succumbs to her injuries and dies. She just sits there for several hours staring at her sister's dead body. Her nieces have made their way back to the safety of the burrow, leaving her there all alone, Raptor Red's worst fear. Raptor Red has pretty much lost everything at this point. She lost both her mates, her sister, her nieces. She herself is crippled and cannot move. In her mind, she has failed and has completely given up. She sits there and basically accepts her fate, as she's able to scent the Deinonychus pack from a distance coming back towards her. Later that night, they finally appear, but notice that Raptor Red is still alive, so they wait patiently for her to perish before getting any closer. Raptor Red lets out one last and very loud call in an attempt to send the pack away, which doesn't work. However, her call had been received, and in the distance, a response can be heard. It's familiar, another Utahraptor call. Soon, the Utahraptor appears, revealed to be Raptor Red's male consort. And while this may seem like he kind of came out of nowhere to save the day, the book did mention earlier that Raptor Red had picked up the scent of the male in the mountain region, implying that he too migrated away from the acro-infested lands to the south. And he finally shows up to help Raptor Red and fights against the Deinonychus pack, killing a couple in the process and sending the rest away. Shortly after the battle, Raptor Red passes out. She goes in and out of sleep until she finally wakes up fully to feel her leg finally healing. She also sensed that the male and her 2 nieces had been around the area but are nowhere to be seen. Sometime later that day, the 3 return with food for Raptor Red. Her pack is together once again, and the male takes this time to perform the bonding dance for her, which finally secures Raptor Red a mate. In the coming weeks, Raptor Red takes time to fully heal, but eventually goes back to hunting with her pack. After one of these hunts, they return to the burrow only to be greeted by another pack of young adult Utahraptors. Raptor Red and her pack watch from the brush, but her oldest niece approaches the newcomers, all of which retreat except for one. They soon realize she's responding to a sexually active male who performs a courtship dance for her. The oldest niece leaves with the male, leaving Raptor Red, her mate, and the youngest chick behind. At this point in time, it's finally April, 1 full year since Raptor Red lost her first mate. At that point, she had lived in an area that was too dangerous to raise chicks and was too afraid for their future. This year, though, she's not afraid and is confident in her new consort. That summer, Raptor Red's pack have increased in numbers. Their home in the northern mountains have proven to be a decent area to raise and provide for a family. Not only did her and her consort birth 3 chicks, but her youngest niece had managed to find her own mate, and together they birthed 2 more chicks. The story ends with the 2 families sliding down a slope of mud together before eventually going back to their nests in their cave. I think what I liked most about Raptor Red is that it continues to prove exactly what Bakker wanted to do with it, in that you're able to mix science and entertainment together to make a genuinely good story. Sure, I'll admit there were things here and there that felt a bit outlandish compared to how I'm used to seeing dinosaurs portrayed in the real world, but it's done in moderation. It never gets to the point where it feels like the story stops being something I can't take seriously. Sure, in some parts maybe the dinosaur emotions bordered a little close to that of human emotions. While I can understand certain dinosaur bonds, I didn't know there could really be one that strong between dinosaur siblings, but who knows? This was probably exaggerated to tell a more compelling story while also incorporating all of the things Bakker wanted in his book. I don't really have a problem with that either. When it comes to fictional works, even if you're trying to be as grounded to the real world as possible, it would be extremely hard not to exaggerate some things to make certain aspects of the story work. Regardless of whether it was a stretch or not, for me, it still worked. The dinosaurs felt realistic, the story was still engaging and fun to follow. Overall, I can see why people love it so much. The overall reception for this book was pretty everywhere based on my research. I think the main criticism came from the more scientific aspect of the book, with many feeling like it wasn't representative enough of real-world dinosaurs and there were too many elements of speculation, anthropomorphism, intelligence, and emotions given to the featured animals to be believable. There were some critical responses from scientists as well who pointed out some of the inconsistencies within Bakker's story, like how apparently some of the dinosaurs featured didn't actually live in the same time period as each other, and that the overall portrayal of them was misleading. On the other side of the spectrum, some people liked this book for the reasons it was criticized. Despite some of the criticism, the book received high praise for its humor, charm, depiction of dinosaurs, incorporation of real-life theories and facts, and overall uniqueness. While I don't really know how well Raptor Red sold, it apparently made $34,000 in audiobook sales, which were generously donated to the Tate Museum in Casper, Wyoming, at least according to Wikipedia. And again, I don't know for sure how much the book made in general, but according to Bakker, it was successful enough to spawn a possible interest of a movie deal for Hollywood. But obviously nothing has come up with that project. The only mention that seems to be available about this is this 1996 article that talks about how film producer Robert Halmy was in the talks with John Stevenson from Jim Henson's special effects company Creature Shop about making deals for a few different movies, Raptor Red being one of them. I guess that idea never came to fruition for reasons we'll probably never fully know. However, I can guess that, at the very least, a part of it probably had something to do with the unconventional method of completely subtracting dialogue from a film. I could be wrong, and there's no doubt more at play here than just that, but, I just thought I'd speculate a little bit. Regardless, even though there isn't a Raptor Red movie, it still has a pretty solid fan base that talk about it even to this day. I know because there are people in my comment section literally telling me to cover this book on my channel. Who knows, maybe one day we'll get some kind of adaptation to the story that will keep the Raptor Red name going. But for now, even if it doesn't hold up well to science, I think the book as a whole holds up as a unique dinosaur story.